Good morning, Seoul, and good evening, America. I'm Usan Kim, currently professor of political science at Yonsei University, and previously served as a Korean ambassador to Australia and president of Korea Foundation. Uh, I'm very honored to moderate today's webinar, co-sponsored by the FMC, the Association of Former Members of the Congress of the United States, and ALC, the Asian Leadership Conference of the Chosun Daily Newspaper, and J. Kim Foundation. Our main topic of the day is the United States midterm election and its impact on East Asia. We have three distinguished participants, the Honorable Lewis Payne Jr., the Honorable John Paso, and the Honorable J. Changjoon Kim. The Honorable Lewis Payne Jr. is a former Democratic member of the United States House of Representative from Virginia, and he's the president of FMC. Honorable John Paso is a former Republican member of the United States House of the Representative from New York. And Honorable J. Changjoon Kim is a former Republican member of the United States House of Representatives from California. Before we begin, I would like to invite Honorable J. Kim to make a short welcoming remark.
I think I said everything already. I didn't
Already.
know that I am. Yeah, I didn't know that I'm supposed to say when you say okay. I don't know what else I can say. Really like to welcome all of you. These two gentlemen were here last year, and I hope you enjoyed it. And so glad to see you again. And congratulations, Mr. Payne. You become a presidente. That's a lot of pain in the neck. Mr. John Paso, welcome again. We're going to have a two this year. This year, this year. Two sponsors kind of both want to have this trip next year. I don't know. We are negotiating. One of them is, again, Chosun Daily, which is the biggest newspaper. Second one is a church, the biggest church in Korea. But we'll see. We've been kind of talking to them and whether we can have it twice a year or what. Besides, the last trip has been so successful. God, almost all the Koreans read about it. They saw the picture. You are very popular in Korea. Professor Kim did a wonderful job. That's enough. I think I said enough on that.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable J. Kim. About 2.5 hours ago, Kim Jong-un regime launched a ballistic missile. And this is a second missile that they launched this year. And it is an act of aggression, which is the violation of UN Security Council resolution. I think this morning is a perfect time for us to discuss US midterm election result and its impact on security architecture in the Indo-Pacific region. Foreign policy is not usually the important issue in the United States election, but this year could be an exception. In recent months, President Biden's approval ratings are low, as I understand, partly due to his foreign policy decisions, such as hurried withdrawal of the troops from Afghanistan and moribund nuclear deal with Iran, to name just two. Together with rising discontent over his handling of the economic issues, his foreign policy performance could have a negative impact on this year's midterm election result. But before we go into foreign policy issues, I would like to hear your assessment of domestic political situation in the United States. How is President Biden doing domestically? I understand that President Biden, with a slim majority in Congress is struggling to unite his party behind his policy priorities. How is he doing in dealing with economics, including the inflation issues and the tapering plan? How about dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic issue based on his administration's performance on fighting the COVID-19 pandemic and economic recovery? How is his approval rating? I would like to hear your views on the situation right now. Who wants to go first? Honorable
Well,
Payne or Paso?
yeah, let me start if I might. And I want to begin by thanking Congressman Jay Kim, who's a colleague of mine when I was in the Congress and a very respected member of Congress. And certainly we appreciate all that Jay did in the Congress, but also appreciate very much what the Jay Kim Foundation is now doing in the work that we're able to do, the U.S. former members, as a result of the support that we're getting from Jay and from his wife Jennifer and from their foundation. And we so appreciate that. And wanted to also say hello to my colleague, John Paso, who also served with great distinction from the state of New York. And it's a real pleasure to be on this program with John. And Professor Kim, thank you for that fine introduction and for setting this up. Thanks also to the Asian Leadership Conference and to the Chosun Daily for making all this possible. You were asking about President Biden. I must say 2021 has been about as difficult a year to be the president of the United States or any country that imaginable, primarily because of the COVID experience and the fact that it's been so entirely unpredictable. It was in July when he announced that he thought we were beyond it or out of it, and we felt so good about how well we'd done, only to have the Delta variant attack, and that then totally set us back. And before we could get over that, Omnicom comes along, and as you know, and as we all know, we're all dealing with that. So it's been a very difficult year. But I do think there are a lot of progress has been made. The U.S. is very proud of the fact that we've developed vaccines and we've developed medications that are fighting this not only in the U.S. but fighting it worldwide. And I think too that the Biden administration has things that they can point to, accomplishments. We see that the number of jobs that have been created in this past year is a large number. Unemployment is down less than 4%, which was is a very good place to be in terms of our economy. We're seeing the stock market now at just at the end of the year at all-time high numbers in terms of the Dow Jones Industrial Average Index and that sort of thing. So there are a lot of good things that have gone on in the United States. You point out, though, the challenges in terms of the politics and difficulty in Washington with the president dealing with the Congress with such narrow majorities. It's very difficult to get everything done that he had said that he would do when he ran for president. And we're seeing that playing out now in terms of some of his initiatives that he's tried really hard to get done have gotten through the House, but are stuck in the Senate. And it's very challenging trying to get those done. His approval rating is negative, meaning it's less than 50%. Now, I think it's more like 43 or 44% approve and about 51% disapprove. So clearly, I think he has lots of room to improve, and it's important for the Democrats that he does improve if, in fact, they will have a successful midterm election.
Okay. Mr. Paso, do you want to make any comment?
Certainly. Well, thank you, and thank you to Chosen Daily and my good friend Congressman Jay Kim. And our distinguished incoming president, L.F. Payne, of the former members of Congress. And I just, while LF and I did not serve in Congress together, I had a career in the state legislature in New York prior to being in Congress and in the law and in the law business. But Congressman Payne was very well regarded on both sides of the aisle, and so his reputation really went well beyond the state of Virginia. And let me just say, I think Congressman Payne has laid it out pretty well. I think there's another factor that as we head towards the midterm elections this coming November, and that is the simple fact is that history says that when you have an incumbent president elected in his first term, also with control of Congress, then inevitably the other side, the party on the outs, and this time the Republicans, will have an advantage in the first off-year election after a new president is elected. Historically, in the House of Representatives, for instance, in the last few decades, the out party, namely this time the Republicans, would pick up on average about 26 seats in the House of Representatives. That would, if we were to pick up that number of seats, give us a majority, restore a Republican majority in the House. The Senate is 50-50. It's very much a jump ball, if you will, in terms of which party will win control. I can guarantee you, whichever party wins control, it'll be narrow, the control in the U.S. Senate. So President Biden has had to deal with a number of issues that are really we haven't seen in 100 years since the 1918, 1919 pandemic. It's a very unusual situation. I think the risk for anyone in public office is when they make statements about being able to control this pandemic. Controlling a virus is, of course, very, very difficult and if not impossible. So the U.S. has made great strides in terms of the development of vaccines, the development of therapeutic drugs. A number of our pharmaceutical companies have developed therapeutic drugs that are rapidly going to become available over the next few months. And we hope that this latest variant will, as it frankly is spreading through the population, but its effects are generally very mild on most people. So the hope is that we will turn the corner on this virus and move forward. Congressman Payne mentioned our unemployment rate is low. That's true. There's a fair amount of dissatisfaction about inflation. And of course, events take place. What happens in foreign policy while Americans, Professor Kim, you mentioned Americans don't pay a lot of attention sometimes to foreign policy until it is thrust in front of them. Well, we have the Ukraine and President Putin to deal with right now, and that is occupying attention. And of course, the predominant fact of our U.S. foreign policy is going to be our relationship in Asia, how we deal with China, and how we work with our allies, notably South Korea and Japan, as well as friendly nations such as India and Australia. You were the ambassador to Australia, Professor. I think all of these are going to be very important, not just for the next couple of years, but the next few decades.
All right. Listen to what both of you have said. Sounds very much like Biden's approval rating is a bit low, less than the 50%. And Republicans seems to become controlling both House and Senate. So we have to wait and see. Okay, I have a related question about the political polarization issue. How serious is the political polarization, which was vividly witnessed during the so-called January 6th Capitol riot by Trump supporters 1 year ago? some may think that the more polarized, the less likely anti-Trump voters move toward the Republican candidate, even if Biden administration's performance may be mediocre. So maybe beneficial to the Democratic side. Some may think that way.
Well, let me just let me go first on this one. I think polarization is a real issue in the United States. There's a general distrust of authority on the part of many people in our country, and there are a lot of reasons for that. You see this actually around the world in terms of either parties on the left or parties on the right dealing with dissatisfaction, social upheaval in their nations. And I don't have an easy answer to it. I mean, we have a lot of factors: social media, the distrust of authority, the fracture, the polarization in our media, where people tend to listen and watch the things that they agree with. And but I think that what's really important is for Americans, and I found when I served in Congress that there were many Democrats and Republicans that are, most people there are intending to work hard for the public, to work across the aisle. But in this polarized society, what gets attention in the media tends to be those people that are on the extremes, whether they're on the left or the right. So the attack on the Capitol, the riot at the Capitol just a year ago, was a shocking event. I said at the time that I thought that President Trump really bore a lot of responsibility for that by his actions and his words after the 2020 election. And I hope that as we go forward, we can turn a corner on this. That may be an ill-placed hope, but I believe that it's important for people on both sides of the aisle to try to find common ground, find areas where we can agree, and move forward. I think that's really what our responsibility is.
And I have to agree with John on that. I would like to add just a couple of things. One, I think January 6th was really a horrendous event. I was not in Washington. I saw, as perhaps you did as well, much of that going on live on television. And it was just unbelievable that that could be happening at the U.S. Capitol, which we all who serve there feel is almost a temple to democracy. And to see that kind of activity and to disruption and the insurrection that happened that day was just really shocking and disappointing. As that relates to the election of 2022, this is an unusual time because as many as a third of Americans don't really believe that President Biden was fairly elected. And that's never been the case in our country. And so as we move to the next election, we have to keep in mind that there are many people who don't feel good about the last one. And I think John's point about us, and especially an organization like ours, U.S. former members of Congress, have a responsibility to continue to reach out to people on the other side of the aisle, to work in a bipartisan way, to continue to work on the programs that we work on, sending our members out to colleges and universities to talk to students. And democracy, which I think many of us thought we would just always have democracy in the U.S., and it was just a question of how good could we make it. We now realize that it's something that has to be worked on and has to be advocated for, and not only in the U.S., but around the world. And so we are doing that as an organization, and we as individuals are doing that. But to your point, Professor, I think the January 6th was a real dark moment in American democratic life.
Well, I kind of agree that in many places, not just the United States, many places around the world, definition of democracy seems to be misused. There are many places. Very short question. I hear that Mr. Trump is still considered the front runner for the 2024 presidential election. Do you think that the midterm election result would be crucial for Mr. Trump candidacy for the 2024 election? Very, short answer, please.
I think it's very hard to say. I tend to believe that President Trump will not run in 2024. I think that he will decide it's in his best interest not to do so. But I have no inside knowledge in that regard. I hope, as a Republican, that he chooses to step aside and not seek election in 24. I think it's time for us to turn that page, if you will. He certainly has an important role in the Republican Party. There are many people in the Republican Party that strongly believe in him. And I think that many of us who were supportive of many of his policies, but not supportive of much of the rhetoric and the approach that was taken, would look for a new candidate, a younger candidate, candidly. I think the plain fact is that President Biden will be near 82 years old when he finishes this term. President Trump, if he runs again, will be 78 or 79 years old. And candidly, I think that's a bit too old to be running for that office, which is an extremely demanding office. So I hope that we can turn the page politically.
Okay, I'd like to move on to foreign policy issues. No matter the foreign policy could affect the midterm election result or not, the election results could affect the foreign policy for the rest of the President Biden's term. So in the midterm election result, well, we may guess that both House and Senate could be controlled by the Republican. If Republicans take control of foreign affairs and defense committees in the House and the Senate after the midterm election, do you think that hegemonic competition between the United States and Xi Jinping China in the Indo-Pacific region becomes more serious? Republican lawmakers have been criticizing the Biden administration for not being tough enough on China. Second question I'll give you. Do you also think that there may be a possibilities that the Republican leaders could hold up the Biden administration's key foreign policies, such as related to Russia and Ukraine issue or the Taiwan Strait issue?
Well, let me start, and I'll let John pitch in on this one as well. But let me, before I get into those two questions, which are really very good questions, and thank you for those. I just want to say a few words about the U.S. and South Korea. You know, we've had a long relationship starting essentially in the early 1950s in the Korean War. My own experience, I was in the Army and was stationed in Korea, and I was there in the late 1960s, early 1970s. And when I was in Korea, Korea was very much a third world country. And it was very agrarian and was struggling in terms of its economics and its place in the world. And what has happened there is a miracle. And I think the Korean people should be so proud of what you have accomplished in a generation or in your lifetimes in making Korea such an important, not only an important ally of the United States, but such an important member of the international community that all nations, I think, look to and respect Korea and want to be friends with and allies with you. So I think, you know, in terms of our relationship, the U.S. and Korea, I think it's a strong one today. I think it will only be stronger as we move to the future. I know we've got a number of issues that are on the table that we need to deal with, and we can certainly talk about those. But regarding your questions about China and about the foreign policy, I do think, first of all, when you have a divided government and you have a president of one party and then the Congress, be it one or both houses of the other party, generally what happens is not so much that things change a great deal in terms of the strategy, especially from an international point of view, but it becomes a stalemate. It becomes difficult to get things done. And so I would say that a Biden agenda in a situation where you have a Republican Congress, you'll find that there'll be a lot of back and forth, a lot of challenges, a lot of trading, but it will not be that the Congress suddenly grabs the agenda and takes it in a different place, as much as the president and the Congress will be negotiating about lots of different things, and those will incrementally move, I think, things both at home and abroad. But I do think, Professor Kim, that the situation with China is one that's not just the Republicans who have concerns about what's going on in China and with President Xi. I think we all in the U.S. have those concerns and are looking at what is the right way that we in China can go forth and not be, have the old Cold War or not be enemies of each other, but how can we go forth and in a world where there are two big, great powers, but finding ways that we can move in the same direction in important issues. Important issues such as climate change being one where we and China, I think, have a lot of common interest and could find ways to work together. But I do think in any event, our relationship with China is one that we're struggling with and one that we're need to do a better job of defining as President Xi seemingly is going to have his third term and move forward in ways that we don't quite know what to expect. The second question on that key foreign policy issues and what I think I touched on some of those. And again, I don't know that it is a fact that the Congress will usurp the power of the president and move us in a different direction. But I think the Congress can hold lots of hearings and create lots of interest in issues that may not have much interest today, and will have an impact in terms of foreign policy, not to necessarily change the direction, but to influence it. And certainly that's something that the Biden administration and the State Department are going to have to work very closely with the members of Congress who are on the key committees.
Thank you. Mr. Paso, do you have any?
Yeah, to add to what LF has said, I think the mistake that the administration made with Democrats in Congress is that they had very narrow majorities, 5 or 6 seats in the House, a 50-50 Senate, and they attempted to pass very, very major sweeping legislation, which is currently held up in Congress. If the Republicans were to take control of one or both houses, I think it's going to actually force both sides to engage in good faith negotiations to try to move things forward. And where there's, I think, an emerging consensus over the last few years with Democrats and Republicans is that I think we finally recognize the situation with China, recognize that they are intending to supplant the United States as the major economic, political, diplomatic, and military force in the world, that we need to work with allies, South Korea, Japan, Australia, others in the Pacific Rim, like the Philippines and Thailand and India. We need to work closely with them to create a mutual engagement so that China realizes that it cannot just pick off one nation or another in order to advance its agenda and its aims. It has been very aggressive under President Xi, let's face it. And there are some that have written in the United States that the aim of China is to supplant the United States and become the leading power in the world globally, financially, economically, and every other way. And I think that's something that Americans and both sides in Congress have come to realize in the last few years. So how we deal with this going forward is going to be a critical question. And the concern I have is that the United States may have put itself in a weakened position economically by the scale and magnitude of our budget deficits, the just during COVID, for instance, we've spent between Congress on the fiscal side and the Fed on the monetary side over $8 trillion of stimulus that has created an inflation. But it's also lessened our ability to react to additional problems and unexpected things that may happen in the future. And that's really the concern I have in terms of the U.S. ability to deal with China as a growing rival and indeed threat in the world to the U.S. system. So I think that it's going to be really important for us to work together. If Republicans take over Congress, it's going to be critical for our side to work with the Biden administration, and hopefully, now that in that such an eventuality, President Biden won't be able to ram through major policy initiatives that Republicans will object to. It will force both sides to actually get to the table and negotiate and move forward in good faith.
Definitely, we have to work together with alliance partners in the United States to deal with the rise of China issue. But most of the people in the Asia Pacific and the Indo-Pacific region would not want to see that competition can become a zero-sum type of game. As Mr. Payne also have commented, if on the one side there is a Democratic president and on the other side is Republican majority in Congress, then I expect that the hearings and all these will slow down the process of making very important foreign policy decision making. So that may have some impact. Before we move on to another one, I would like to comment on this, the miracle of Han River. That has happened in 30, 40 short period of time. It's the only country, Korea, the only country which made a successful economic development and at the same time with the democratization. This Han River miracle was not possible without your support, American support. You saved our country while we were at the verge of, destruction, and now we are prospering. And on behalf of the Korean people, I really thank to you. And we need to strengthen, upgrade our alliance relationship between Korea and the United States. Move on to another question. Almost 1 year after the inauguration of the Biden administration, American ambassador to Republic of Korea is not still nominated yet. You know that, right? Is the Republican control of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee in the Congress will make any difference in nominating and confirming future Korean ambassador? You know, ambassador to Japan, Mr. Emmanuel, and ambassador to Australia, Ms. Kennedy, are already nominated and confirmed, right? Why is that so? I mean, is the North Korean nuclear issue not as important as the United States Indo-Pacific strategy to deal with the rise of China? Or is it because the alliance ties between Korea and the United States these days is not as strong or trustworthy as the Japan-U.S. ties or Australia-U.S. ties, or what? You have any answer for that?
Well, let me just make a couple of comments on that. First of all, I mean, you're exactly right. And I think it's a big mistake that we do not have an ambassador who is today in Seoul. And I totally agree with that. Um, Usually by this time, presidents have 2/3 of all of their ambassadors who have been confirmed and are in country. As of the end of December, this administration only had 16% of its ambassadors confirmed and in country. And so it's not exclusively a problem that is, associated with Korea. This is happening around the world, and it's a real problem for the U.S. to have its foreign policy be as successful as it might be without these people. And so, again, I think this gets back to politics and people in the Senate, how they are choosing to deal with these nominations. And I think whether it's Democrats in charge or Republicans, it's critical that this be done. And particularly in Korea, where we have so many important issues that we've already touched on, a number of those. I mean, it's critical that we have an ambassador there and in place. So I don't offer any excuses except to say that this is not unique to Korea. It's happening in a number of places around the world.
LF is absolutely correct, and it's really a sad commentary, and I think there's a lot of blame to go around on this score. Senators that hold up nominations for extraneous reasons, the difficulty in getting people to accept positions, and I don't know what the particular situation is with why the administration has been so slow in terms of naming an ambassador to Korea, but it's something we definitely need to get to work on much more speedily.
Okay. During the Trump administration, the United States, emphasizing America first, suggested countries in the region, including the Republic of Korea, to join the United States-led Quad, Quadrilateral Security Dialogue and Economic Prosperity Network. But some partners and allies of the United States, including South Korea, have been reluctant to participate in those multilateral frameworks. Now, Biden administration, promoting democracy and the importance of trustworthy alliance partnership, suggests that Republic of Korea and other countries in the region join the United States-led Quad and Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. Again, American ambassador to India and ambassador to Japan, to Australia, all nominated and confirmed. And these three countries are members of the Quad. Should South Korea also participate in the Quad to upgrade our alliance ties so that the American ambassador to Korea is quickly nominated and confirmed and become one of the 16%? Now, I thought that South Korean ambassador, American ambassador to Korea should be included in 5%, maybe even 3%, but not even included in 16%, right? So, what do you think should South Korea do to demonstrate our true friendship with the United States? We are going to have a presidential election on March 19th this year. What is your suggestion to our newly inaugurated government about 4 months from now to recover our ironclad alliance relationship? South Korea joining the Quad will be enough for that? How do you think?
Professor Kim, I don't know that it's a matter that Korea needs to do anything in addition to what it is doing or has already done. I understand your point and the fact that there is no ambassador to South Korea at the present time. I can't explain that, and there should be. But I think in terms of of how does that get done, I think it is an internal matter in the U.S. and within the State Department and within the Congress, and that needs to be worked out. Of course, the U.S. very much would like for Korea to be part of the Quad, and I think that is one of the things that John just talked about. How do we build alliances in Eastern Asia and Southeast and Eastern Asia of countries that can hold together, work together, and ensure that that region continues to grow as it has and be as strong as and important as it currently is. And the United States sees that as a very, very important initiative and a very, very important part of their foreign policy. But I don't think that, it's a matter of a quid pro quo. If you would join, suddenly the ambassador would show up. I think the ambassador, that's a matter that desperately needs to be done by the U.S. and needs to be done very quickly.
I completely agree with what Congressman Payne said. I think that we have to recognize, and this is part of the issue, I think, in the United States, is Americans generally don't pay a whole lot of attention to foreign policy unless it's a big problem, unless it's something on the front burner to them. But Americans have become much more cognizant of the competition with China, and China is working, whether it's through its Belt and Road Initiative, whether it's working to secure naval bases in the Indian Ocean, or even in Latin America. China is working very hard to assert itself across the globe. And Americans need to really wake up to the facts of the matter. And we have to work very closely with South Korea on our defense. We have to deal with the Taiwan issue. And we have to deal with the fact that we need our allies in East Asia to be working with us and to be working collaboratively. And sometimes that gets sensitive when you're dealing with, for instance, the relations between South Korea and Japan. And we need both countries to be closely aligned and collaborating on a whole range of diplomatic and military issues as well. So you are absolutely right, Professor, about the ambassador situation. And I know that I'm going to make a few phone calls tomorrow to some of my friends in Washington to try to get to the bottom of where this nomination is, because it's something that we should get done. And I frankly would like to see it done certainly before the new president is elected in March.
I think that it is not just appointment or nomination of the ambassadorship. I think it has a symbolic meaning, very, significant symbolic meaning. So that's why
it sends the wrong message that we don't have an ambassador there. And your questions, Professor, are very evident. You've gotten our attention, certainly.
Related question. If South Korea decides to participate in the Quad or in the Pacific Economic Framework, which were led by the United States, it'll be almost certain that South Korea will be under China's heavy economic retaliation. We have seen that when we introduced the THAAD system to the Korean Peninsula. In that kind of situation, don't you think that the United States should help South Korea when we try to deal with China's economic retaliation? No? If you demonstrate that kind of willingness, then many countries in the Pacific Rim region would love to participate in the Quad and other U.S.-led multilateral framework. Otherwise, they'll be very much scared of Chinese potential economic retaliation. It is almost certain.
Right. Well, we have to be consistent in terms of our policy, and we see China using economic coercion all across the world. I mean, South Korea is right across the water from China. You're very close. 30% of your trade is with China. So you have a close relationship economically. But China is now conducting economic blackmail against Lithuania. Think about that. I mean, one of the Baltic states. So their reach is very, very long. And the only way that the United States and its democratic allies, as well as other nations which share the same concern about China in East Asia, the only way we can deal with this situation is to be firm, to be consistent, and to be present. And that's something that we really need to work on and do better.
Well, and to your point, Professor Kim, about should the U.S. then assist Korea if, in fact, China retaliates? I think the answer to that is yes. I mean, I think in 2017, when the THAAD occurred, China really, all the negative things that happened against Korea, not against the U.S. When that happened, and it happened in one of your companies that provided the land for that, I think, too, found that they were being affected economically. And so I think the whole purpose of putting these relationships together is so that we are working together toward good purposes. And if people retaliate, I think from an economic point of view, we should all be prepared then to pitch in and see what we can do to help defend. So I think that's an important part of a relationship like that.
The Australian Scott Morrison administration demonstrated very well that they can still fight back Chinese economic retaliation. Maybe it is not in return for that, but now U.S. is providing nuclear submarine to Australia. This is a very good news for Australia, and maybe they may send some messages to many countries around the Indo-Pacific region. Hopefully, move on to another question. Mr. John Bolton criticized the Biden administration for doing nothing for one whole year to deal with the North Korean nuclear weapons development. In January 5th, about a week ago, and today, North Korean regime also already launched ballistic missiles, and that demonstrates the aggressiveness. Do you think that it was because of the Biden administration was caught up with the domestic politics, or what? Will the situation change after the midterm election? It's because during the election period, we are very slow in responding to this kind of important foreign policy issues?
Well, I'm not so sure about the midterm elections and this issue. I mean, there have been successive American administrations that have attempted. President Trump tried directly. President Obama and President Bush before him tried in dealing with Pyongyang, and it has not been successful. So I think we need to show steadfastness. We need to make sure that I think it was a mistake, for instance, by President Trump to suspend our joint military exercises. I think those are critical for us to show that our alliance is strong. But we need to work with Japan, with South Korea on containing the North Korean threat. And obviously, China is going to be key to that as well. I don't think China has been particularly cooperative in that regard. So I think it may be that we have to deal with maintaining the status quo. It may be that North Korea, given their economic problems, I mean, we've read about issues with food supply and potential malnutrition and starvation even among some in North Korea. It's no secret that the regime seems to get more belligerent when they have more problems at home. So I think we just have to continue to keep the pressure on them, but we have to always we should never give anyone the impression, particularly Pyongyang, that our commitment to South Korea is less than complete. We have to have a complete and total commitment to the defense of South Korea and Japan to deal with North Korea.
And also, U.S. can carry out another UN Security Council resolution, economic sanction against North Korea, because North Korean regime is still launching these missiles, right? I mean, if after the midterm election, if Republican control the Congress, maybe Republicans may push Democrats to do something. We would like to see Americans work very hard to deal with this North Korean nuclear issue. Uh, do you think that the Republicans have different views on other, including North Korean nuclear issue and declaration of the end of the Korean War issue as well? Do you think that Republican lawmakers have different views compared to Democrats or Democratic government? Because we hear that there is a report that Biden administration is discussing and negotiating with the Korean government on the content of the declaration of the end of the Korean War. But the Republican lawmakers wrote letter to the Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, opposing premature end of war declaration for the Korean War. So, I mean, without the Kim Jong-un regime giving up nuclear weapons, denuclearizing, do you think that declaring the end of war makes sense to you?
Well, I haven't fully considered that subject, I have to say, but I don't think, I think that's more a form over substance. I think the real issue is the degree to which we're able to maintain uh, economic pressure using carrots and sticks with North Korea. And I think we have to, Americans tend to look at things from the standpoint of every 2 years or every 4 year election cycle. I think we just have to take a long term view. And I don't think there's really much daylight between members of Congress on the Democratic side and the Republican side here. I think Ami Bera, who is the head of the Korea Study Group in the House, who I know well, I think he has views on the North Korean situation that very much approximate where his Republican colleagues are in the House.
Yeah, let me comment on that as well, because I think John is exactly right. I think the issue as it relates to North Korea is one where the Congress and the administration and all of the representatives of both parties feel very strongly that this is an issue that we as Americans are absolutely committed to oppose, and that this is so important, needless to say, to the world and certainly to South Korea. I was reminded when I was there just 2 years ago and went to the DMZ and how very close it is to Seoul. And I know how bothersome all that must be all the time, but it's very bothersome to those of us in the Congress or who've been in the Congress on both sides of the aisle. And so I think you've got our total attention and total backing and support as it relates to President Kim and whatever it is he may choose to do as he moves forward. I do think ending the Korean War finally is something worthy of trying to sort out how we might get there. And part of that certainly would be looking at how we deal with the nuclear weapons.
Okay, thank you. I think we have about 2 minutes left. So I
Ah,
would like all three of you to have about 30 seconds closing remark. Jay, would you want to go first?
I really don't have anything to say. Lewis Payne and John Paso did a wonderful job. My golly, but next time we'll change the subject, more Korean driven. We got an election coming up around the corner. What they think of than just North Korean issue. But very good, Dr. Kim. You did a good job as usual. John Faso, my God, she should run for the president. And Louis Payne, I know you're going to be a president soon in this FMC. And I didn't mention that last year maybe church group might support you, but I'd like to thank you, Chosun Ilbo. They did a wonderful job. They're the largest, most respectable newspaper in Korea, but they continue doing this program. I think it's really, God bless them. God bless you all. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Mr. Faso?
well, thank you to Chosen Media and Professor Kim and my good friend Jay Kim and Congressman Payne for sharing this opportunity. Um, I just want to say our alliance is strong. We have to continue to work at it. We have to make it better. We have to continue our economic cooperation, and I think that's the key to our to peace and uh, unity in East Asia. And it's very critical for the United States to stay involved. And that's one of the great things about our relationship with the former members of Congress. It keeps many avenues of communication going, and so I look forward to that in here in 2022.
Thank you. Honorable Payne?
Let me also say thank you, and on behalf of the U.S. Association of the Former Members of Congress, thanks to the Asian Leadership Conference and to the Chosen Daily and Professor Kim, thank you. We always learn a lot when we have these conversations. I've certainly done that this evening, which I'll take back to the former members. And there are issues here that clearly we hopefully can be helpful on. But thank you all very much. And thank you, John, and thank you, Jay. It's always a pleasure to have an opportunity to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you. We had a 60-minute long, excellent, and very helpful discussion to promote our understanding of American domestic politics and its impact on East Asian security order, and strengthening of, especially of our bilateral alliance ties. I really appreciate your frank and excellent comments and participation. I thank you very much, Honorable Payne, Honorable Faso, and Honorable Kim. Before concluding today's webinar, on behalf of the co-sponsors, I would like to thank all the staff members for their excellent assistance. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.